I want to tell you about a Sunday morning in September of 1968. I am 30 years old. I am standing in the hallway of my parents' farmhouse in Wayne County, Ohio, in my good dress, my hair pinned beneath my cap, my hands folded in front of me, the way my mother taught me. The door to the front room is closed. Behind it, I can hear voices, low, deliberate, the way men speak when they have already decided. My father's voice, the bishop's voice, two of the deacons. And then I hear something that stops the breath in my body. My name, spoken in that room, by those men, in that particular tone. Not the way your mother says it when supper is ready. Not the way your husband says it in the early morning when the house is still quiet. The way a verdict is read. Flat. Final. The door does not open. Nobody calls me in. I stand in that hallway for a long time after the voices stop, my hand flat against the wood of that door, and I understand. That is the last time anyone in my Amish community will ever say my name again. I am 56 years gone from that hallway. I am 86 years old, and I have never forgotten the sound of a door that never opened. My name is Anna. I was born in 1938 in Wayne County, Ohio, the third daughter of a farming family, old order Amish, from the first breath I ever drew. I left when I was 30, and this channel, Hannah the Amish girl, is where the truth of lives like mine is finally spoken out loud by the women who lived them. If you want to hear stories like this one, stories that were never meant to be told, please subscribe and tap the like button. And in the comments, tell me where you are in the world. I read every single one. And today of all days, I want to know who is out there listening. Now let me explain something, because I know how that hallway sounds to you. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, how does a community stop saying a name? You are thinking, that cannot be real. That cannot be how human beings treat each other. So let me tell you how it works. In old order Amish communities, the highest form of discipline is called the ban, the shunning. It is not a new practice. It comes from the Dordrecht Confession of 1632, a document the Amish have followed for nearly 400 years. The ban is not simply being asked to leave. It is a complete severing. You are no longer spoken to directly. You are no longer spoken about directly. In the most conservative communities, your name itself becomes a thing that is handled with care, used only when absolutely necessary, and then only in formal settings, never in the ordinary warmth of daily life. You are present in memory, but absent in voice. The community does not forget you. They simply stop saying you. To eat at the same table as a shunned person is forbidden. To do business with them is forbidden. To accept a gift from their hand is, in the strictest interpretation, forbidden. The idea is that the pain of exclusion will bring the person back to repentance and to the fold. For some it works, for many it does not. And for a few of us, what it did instead was something nobody planned and nobody predicted. It made us permanently, entirely, irreversibly ourselves. I had been questioning since I was 24, not loudly. I was not a loud woman. I sat with it the way you sit with a stone in your shoe on a long walk, always there, always uncomfortable, telling yourself you will stop and deal with it in a moment, and then walking another mile. What I questioned first was small. Why could I not read the books my English neighbor left on her porch for anyone to take? Why were the church services entirely in High German, a language most of us could not fully understand, when God surely understood Ohio the same as anywhere else? Why did asking a question in church feel the same as saying something wrong? The questions grew. I did not choose for them to grow. They grew the way roots grow under a house, quietly, slowly, and then suddenly the floor begins to shift, and you understand that something beneath you has been moving for years. I want you to understand what a woman's life looked like inside that world in the 1950s and 1960s, because I think people imagine it as simpler than it was. Simple in the modern sense, yes. No electricity, no radio, no car, but not simple in the human sense. There were 31 people living within half a mile of my parents' house, all of them Amish, all of them watching and known and watching back. Your entire interior life happened inside a community that had an opinion about it. There was no such thing as a private doubt. A doubt was a spiritual failing, and spiritual failings were visible the way mud on a white apron is visible. You learned very early to keep your face arranged. You learned to say the right words at the right moment. You learned that belonging required a kind of daily performance, and that the performance was not considered dishonest. It was considered faithfulness. That was the word they used. Faithfulness. And I was faithful for 24 years before I finally understood that I was faithful to something I no longer fully believed, and that the performance was costing me something I could not name but could feel going, the way heat goes from a room when the fire is not tended. By the time I was 28, I had already met Thomas. He was not Amish. He repaired farm equipment, and he came twice that summer to fix the baler on my father's property. He ate lunch at the edge of the field, not at our table, because that is how it was done with English workers. But I brought him water twice, and we spoke. Not about anything serious, about the heat, about the field, about how the baler had been giving trouble since the previous harvest. But he spoke to me the way people speak to someone whose thoughts matter, not around me the way I had been spoken to my whole life. To me, at me, like I was standing in the center of the room rather than at the edges of it. I did not fall in love with Thomas over a water bucket. It is more complicated than that and more ordinary. Over the following 2 years, I saw him 6 times. 6 conversations spread across 2 years, in plain sight at the edges of fields and fences, in a hardware store once where I had gone with my brother. 6 conversations that somehow rearranged everything inside me that had been quietly shifting for years. I made my decision in the spring of 1968. I wrote my parents a letter. I did not leave in the night like some do. I thought writing the letter was the honest thing, the right thing, the thing that would at least leave a door open. I said I was leaving the community. I said I was not leaving God. I said I loved them. I folded that letter and put it under the salt shaker on the kitchen table on a Thursday morning, and I walked out of my father's house with a single bag and the dress on my back. And I did not look at the building as I went down the lane. The following Sunday was when the voices gathered behind that door. I came back not to stay, but because my mother had sent word through a neighbor woman that she wanted to see me once more, before the bishop's decision was made formal. I do not know if my mother ever truly intended for me to come in. I do not know if she had permission to send that message or sent it on her own, in secret, the way mothers sometimes act in the space between what the church allows and what the heart requires. I stood in that hallway. I heard my name. The door did not open. I walked back down the lane. Nobody tells you what the first year looks like. I think people imagine leaving as a kind of arrival, a door opening onto something wide and clear. It is not like that. The first year, I lived in a rented room above a hardware store in a town 12 miles from where I had grown up. I had $37, a change of clothes, and the ability to bake bread, preserve vegetables, and sew an even seam. I did not know how to drive a car. I did not know what most things in the English world cost. I did not know how to be a person whose thoughts were entirely her own, because I had never been that person before. Thomas was patient. He brought me through things one at a time. The first time I sat in a movie theater, I cried, not because of what was on the screen, but because nobody in that dark room knew my name or my family or what I had left, and the anonymity of it was the most overwhelming thing I had ever felt. I was 30 years old, and I was beginning entirely from the beginning. That is not a tragedy, but it is not nothing either. I want you to know both of those things at once. What happened over the next 11 Sundays. I cannot carry it in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote it all down. The book is called The Sundays. Link in the description and pinned comment. I want to tell you about my mother, because this is where it gets complicated, and simple things have never been the whole truth. My mother's name was Miriam. She was a quiet woman, the way certain kinds of strong women are quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they decided long ago that their saying it would cost more than they were willing to spend. She had 14 children. I was the third. She kept a kitchen the way some women keep a church. Everything in its place. Everything with a purpose. The bread always on the left side of the counter. The lamp always trimmed before supper. Order as a form of love. She was not a cold woman. She was a precise one. After the ban was made formal, I did not see my mother for 3 years. 3 years and 4 months, to be exact, because I counted. And then one morning in January of 1972, I was working at the dry goods store in town where I had found a job, and I looked up from behind the counter, and my mother was standing at the door. She was wearing her good coat and her black bonnet, and her hands were folded the same way mine had been in that hallway. She looked at me for a long moment. She did not come to the counter. She did not speak my name. But she looked at me the way you look at something you made with your hands, something you are proud of and not permitted to claim. And then she bought a spool of white thread, and she left. I stood behind that counter until my legs stopped shaking. When my coworker asked what was wrong, I said nothing. Nothing was wrong. Everything was wrong. Both things were completely true. She came 4 more times over the next 6 years, always alone, always buying something small, thread, a button card, once a small bar of good soap, never speaking to me directly, never saying my name, but always looking. I came to understand those visits as the most she was allowed to give me, and still remain inside the life she had built. And I want to be careful here because I have spent 50 years working to be careful here. I do not believe my mother was a coward. I believe she was a woman living inside a structure so complete, so total, that what she managed to give me, those 5 silent visits, those 4 spools of thread and 1 bar of soap, was an act of resistance that cost her more than I can fully calculate. She died in 1979. I was not told until 2 weeks after the funeral. I found out through a neighbor who did not know the rules of what I was and was not supposed to know. I sat down on the floor of my kitchen, right there on the linoleum, and I stayed there for a long time. I want to tell you something about that linoleum floor, because it matters. It was yellow, a pale, faded yellow that had been bright once and had worn down over the years I had lived in that house. I had scrubbed that floor myself many times. Thomas had fixed the edges where they were lifting. It was an ordinary floor, in an ordinary kitchen, in an ordinary town. And I sat on it, and I thought about my mother in 1945, when I was 7 years old, and she had stood at the big kitchen table in my father's house and braided my hair for church, her fingers quick and certain, humming something very low under her breath. I had forgotten that until that moment on the linoleum. And then I remembered it completely, the way her hands felt, the particular sound of her humming, the way the morning light came through the window over the sink and made everything gold for about 20 minutes before the day started in earnest. Grief works that way sometimes. It waits until you are on a floor somewhere, and then it gives you back something you did not know you had lost. And the giving back and the losing happen at exactly the same moment. And there is no word for what that is. The thing about shunning that the world does not understand is that it does not feel like hatred. If it felt like hatred, it would be easier to carry. Hatred is a clear thing. You know what to do with it. What shunning feels like from the inside is a very specific kind of erasure. You are still visible. People still see you when they pass you on the road. Your brothers and sisters still know your face. But you exist in a category that has no name in English. Not dead, not estranged, not forgotten. Something else entirely. Something for which the Amish have the bond, and the world outside has no word at all. I have thought about this for 56 years, and I want to say it carefully because I think it matters. The shunning did not make me stop loving my family. I want you to understand that. I have talked to many people since I left, English people, therapists, kind strangers, my own daughter, and they often expect me to feel rage. They expect the story of someone cast out to be a story of bitterness. And there is something in me that is not at peace with what happened. I will not pretend there is not. But rage is not the word for it, and bitterness is not the word for it either. The word, if there is one, is something closer to sorrow. The particular sorrow of people who loved each other and could not find a way to stay in the same room. My father was not a cruel man. My brothers and sisters were not cruel people. They were inside a structure that told them love and obedience were the same thing. And they believed it the way I had once believed it. I had simply stopped. And we did not know how to be in the world together after that. I married Thomas in 1969. We had 31 years together before he died. He was a good man, patient in the way that good men who love complicated women learn to be patient. He never asked me to stop grieving the life I had left, which was the greatest gift he ever gave me. Our daughter was born in 1971. We named her Miriam. Thomas knew without being told why. He never asked me to explain it. My daughter Miriam has children of her own now, and grandchildren. She grew up knowing the shape of what I had lost without knowing all the details. Children understand more than we tell them. She used to ask me, when she was small, whether I missed my mother. I always said yes. She would climb into my lap and put her small hand against my face and say in the serious way of small children, "I am here, Mama. I know you are. I am 86 years old. I have lived outside the community for 56 years, which is almost twice the number of years I lived inside it. The faith I have now is quieter and more private than what I was given as a child. I am not sure it has a name. It is something I have built slowly from what remained after I walked down that lane, and from what Thomas gave me, and from what Miriam carries in her face when she looks at me the way her grandmother looked at me through a dry goods store window. It fits me the way the old faith never quite did." There are things I want to say to anyone who is standing in a hallway right now, on either side of a closed door. If you are the one who left, or who is thinking of leaving, the grief is real. I will not lie to you about that. You do not get to leave without losing something. Whatever anyone tells you about freedom, and they are not wrong about freedom, they sometimes forget to mention that freedom and loss arrive on the same morning. What I want you to know is that the loss does not have the last word. It has many words for many years, but not the last one. If you are the one behind the door, I do not know what you believe about what you are doing. I know what you have been taught. I know the ban is meant to be an act of love, of sacred preservation. But I want to say this as gently and as plainly as I know how. The morning my mother stood at that store counter and looked at me and bought a spool of thread and did not say my name, what I felt from her was love. Enormous, constrained, surviving love. That love was in her the whole time. The door and the love were always in the same house. I hope you know which one endures. I do not know how to end this except to say that my name is Anna. I am 86 years old. I grew up in Wayne County, Ohio. I was the third daughter. I brought a man water at the edge of a field, and it rearranged the rest of my life. I stood in a hallway in September of 1968 and heard my name spoken for the last time in that community, and I walked back down that lane, and I lived. Fully and sometimes painfully and with great love. I lived. If something in this story touched something in you, please leave me a comment. Tell me what surprised you. Tell me if you have a hallway of your own. Tell me your city or your country, because I am 86 years old and I still want to know who is out there, still want to know that these words are landing somewhere. And if you want to keep hearing from behind the prayer cap, from the women who lived it and the ones still living it, subscribe to Hannah the Amish girl. We have so many more truths still waiting. The Sundays, what 20 minutes cannot hold. Description and pinned comment. The morning is yours if you decide it is.